Good morning, everyone. Ben Driggs here with DJ, Navigate Financial. We appreciate your joining us for a few minutes each month. We have a lot of people who listen to our webinar, and we're glad that you can spend some time learning about different topics. As a just quick review, last year, each month we talked about a different area that we work with clients on at Navigate Financial: debt, budget, investments, estate planning, and the like. In 2026, what we're going to be doing each month, we'll be talking about different topics that we consider to be relevant at any given time. Last month we talked about gold. Today we're going to be talking about some macroeconomic issues, and we'll see what next month brings. So this month we have the most ambitious presentation I think we've ever done. We hope you like it. It's an interesting topic. It's a lot. There's a lot to cover, a lot to discuss. So we're going to go relatively quickly. We certainly welcome your questions and apologize in advance if we can't get to all of the questions, but we'll certainly make note of those questions. DJ will be monitoring the question board. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll do my best to stick within the 30 minutes. We really try to stick within the 30-minute time frame, so you can count on that. But if there's one webinar that might go a little longer today, I apologize in advance because we have so much to cover. So without any further ado, we will get going on the webinar. So let's hold on just a second. Can you all see that? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Global strife, isolationism, government, indebtedness. Lots to talk about. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the current state of affairs for each of these categories, the consequences, the outlook, and then finish with some suggestions for consideration. So current state of affairs, we have these three, and you can read along with me. I'll try not to read because we can all read here. So read along on the slides as I go. And I think it's important to understand these trends, because the more we understand, the more we can feel like, we're just not lost at sea. Because I think a lot of people feel completely overwhelmed with things. And sometimes, not always, but I'd say generally speaking, when we have some context for the bigger picture and bigger factors that are influencing things, then at least we can, kind of go to bed at night, at least knowing kind of what's happening. That may not change what we do, but global strife. So let's talk about that. It's increasing for the last, since 2014. So we're looking at 11 straight years through last year. Global strife is increasing. It's very steady. They've been measuring, the most common index is this Global Peace Index by the Institute for Economics and Peace. They started in 2008, and virtually every year it has gone down. It's gone down a noticeable percent point to point from 2008 to 2025. It's unfortunate. We have a lot of militarization. We have not even factored in, this is through, I believe, it's 2025, but through last year's data. We haven't even factored in some of the most recent events, which are unsettling. The important thing to understand here is that the world is spending a lot on things related to conflict. which is the reality of our times. It's unfortunate, but that's where we are. I think the biggest risk right now is that China takes action against Taiwan. I would be surprised if it's military action, although by all means they could take aggressive military action. I think perhaps a more likely scenario is that they move into the Taiwan Strait and start seeking a blockade or some sort of a quarantine to cut off Taiwan from the rest of the world. It'd be very dangerous politically and potentially militarily for China. I'm not sure they want to do that, but China is at arguably the peak of its power economically and militarily. And if you look at what's going to happen to China over the next 10 years or so, it is likely going to start, its power and strength is going to start waning, likely. And so Xi is I think he's 71 years old. I think that they might be thinking, hey, if we're going to get Taiwan, now might be the time to strike. So we'll see. Hopefully that doesn't happen. That would be quite disruptive. As you can see here on the right, we spend a lot of money in the world on things related to violence instead of peace. So our first quiz, DJ, if you will do this, how peaceful is America? So looking at the rankings of 163 countries, where does the United States rank in terms of peacefulness? The first country, by the way, for I think the last 12, 13 years, Iceland. Finland, I think Ireland is number 2. So your Scandinavian countries pretty much consistently top the charts. But I've given you a few different countries. So what is the United States ranking? DJ, what do you do here?
I put out the poll, and so you should see that. For those of you that are a part of the webinar, you should see that pop up here on your screen. It looks like about half the people have voted so far, so they're trickling in here. So we'll give it a second, give it another few seconds. But okay, about 85% of everybody on the call has voted. So
okay, so what are the results?
Most voted for was 52nd. That's that rank number 52. That's the most voted answer, followed very closely by 103.
Do we have anyone at 27 or 128?
15% of the people voted 20 on 27 and 15 on 128. So tied there.
Well, if you feel living in the United States that you're living in a relatively violent country, the data would suggest that you are correct. The answer is number 128. The United States is sandwiched right in between Honduras, Kenya, Brazil is next door neighbor in that, like 120, 130, Libya, and Ecuador. So, and Mexico at 135. So I think we need to keep this in mind when we're promoting the United States as a model. I think we need to perhaps take a humble recognition of the fact that the United States is a relatively violent country. We have a lot of military spending is very significant, and we have a lot of gun violence. 2 primary reasons why our score is so high. Okay, let's talk next about isolationism. For sure, global isolationism is increasing. We go down this list. We have America First populism in the United States that is being mirrored in Europe with a lot of growth on the far right populism, nationalism. We're seeing the same kind of propaganda and nationalist tendencies in China as well. We have protectionism through tariffs. We've got a movement away from established alliances, borders, anti-immigration, regionalization, foreign fatigue, like, oh, I just don't want to get involved. We're done. The United States is done, being involved. Let's just pull back. Let's just take care of ourselves. We have a lot. We can't solve all the world's problems. And these last two you can read for yourselves. So the indisputably global isolation is increasing. So let's talk about Trump and his views and his policies in regards to isolationism. It's kind of interesting because I think we have a mixed bag with President Trump. On the left here, you see ways in which he is pretty predictably isolationist. Make America great again, protectionism with tariffs, border control, anti-immigration rhetoric and policies. Even this morning, I read another, or it was yesterday, potentially moving away from a treaty we have with Canada and Mexico. It's like, you know what? We're done with all these other international agreements. We're going to go it alone, certainly cutting international aid. This was a big move last year, getting rid of USAID, which is just very like, hey, we're just going to take care of ourselves. Everybody has to fend for themselves. That's kind of unhealthy isolationism, in my opinion. You've got Trump, though, on the other hand, is departing from the traditional one with the presidents dating back to Roosevelt. We had an attitude that the United States is really a great country. And so we are going to take care of ourselves, but we're going to promote ideals, democracy, and liberty and rule of law. We are going to be a shining example in Ronald Reagan's. We're going to be I think it was a light on the hill, or a shining light on the hill, something like that. So that is, Ronald Reagan, a view of isolation, that we're going to take care of ourselves, but we're going to be example for the world. That is not what is happening with Donald Trump. And then number two, engagements with other countries. Historically, the United States has taken an approach, or a traditional isolationist would say, yeah, we're going to take care of ourselves first, but we're going to recognize we're part of a bigger world. And so we're going to still be working with other people. What's in the best interest of not only us, but our allies? How can we do this within the context of promoting democracy, freedom, stuff like that? But I think Donald Trump is unambiguous in the way he communicates. It's transactional, quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I scratch your. You don't help me, I don't like you. And so it's very self-interested. That is definitely a break from traditional isolationism. Number three, this real aggressive push for military spending. Most recently, I think it's $1.5 trillion request for budget. That's just like off the charts in terms of aggressive military spending, which would be run contrary to a traditional isolationist who would say, hey, keep the military at home, and militarism is only in the pursuit of defense. And I don't think that Trump is being defensive. On the contrary, I think he's being aggressive with territorial expansion. We're seeing this with a lot of rhetoric: take over Canada, Greenland, and he actually moved on Nicaragua, things that a traditional isolationist would never do. Republicans, Democrats are going in different directions here. We see here the Republicans are moving toward adopting isolationism and being more comfortable with that stance. Interestingly, Democrats, I guess not surprisingly, because there's so much animosity between the parties, they're moving in a different direction. The Democrats saying, hey, this isolationist stuff isn't in our best interest. We need to take more of a global stance. We have one more. Okay. Then the third thing is the debt. The world is groaning under debt. We've reached a point, there's no way we can pay back the debt. Everyone recognizes it. Governments aren't willing to change their habits. And this is not only governments, but corporations, individuals, although individuals, if they did what the government did, they would have been bankrupt a long time ago and they would be out on the streets. Not so with governments. They get away with a lot of things that we citizens don't get to enjoy. Here's a quick quiz. If everyone will hop on, we've got 4 major categories of debt: corporate, government, financial sector, and consumer debt. Collectively 315. Go ahead and choose your vote. Which one is the biggest? And you might be thinking government, but not necessarily. They're all big, quite frankly. They're all quite big. So we give about 10 seconds for everyone to cast their vote.
It's funny, as you said that, government was flooding in with votes to really, at the very beginning, and as soon as you made that comment, all the other 3,
Do you have the ability to change your vote on this thing? I don't know.
Actually, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think once you submit it, it's in.
They're all pretty big. Corporate is number 1, followed by government, but they're both 90 million plus. I mean, it's a 90 trillion, right? So it's close. Corporate is just nudging out. Government debt, followed by financial sector, and then consumer debt is, I think, 60 trillion or something like that. So consumer
most people had voted for financial sector, followed second was government, and then corporate after that. Consumer, it was at the end.
Yeah.
So
the correct answer is actually in order: corporate, government, financial, and consumer, with the first 2 being the biggest. Okay, how great nations become not so great nations. This is, frankly, it comes down to currency and strength of the currency. So when you have an empire dating back to the Roman Empire or the British Empire, the United States Empire, they all follow the same trajectory, right? They get really big and powerful, and then for a host of reasons, they start to decline. We're seeing this, I think, in the United States. We're seeing this starting to develop in China. We saw this again most recently, big empire with the British Empire. But a central factor that we need to understand, it relates to a country or an empire's currency and their financial credibility. So what happens is governments like low interest rates. In the modern context, governments want interest rates to be low. Trump is not alone. Trump is really pushing lower interest rates. But almost everybody wants lower interest rates, because who doesn't want free money, right? So we push for low interest rates, but that is not in the country's best interest. That leads to a currency devaluation, that leads to inflation. And what happens, the cycle is inflation gets to the point where it's no longer politically sustainable. As we write here, inflation is tolerated to preserve political stability. Like, I'm going to push for the economy to be strong, even though I know that's going to cause inflation. And they're willing to accept the consequence of inflation. But as we saw with Biden and Harris, the political consequences, they waited too long. Inflation got out of control. They're out of office. And as I say here, dinner's on me if inflation does not also sink the Republicans in 2026, because there's a point at which inflation simply becomes the deciding factor. It's bigger than the government. So I think, like Trump currently, be careful what you ask for, because if you want lower interest rates, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't get lower interest rates and, we're going to do tariffs and we're going to have government debt, and I don't want inflation either. You got to choose which one you're going to have. And almost always governments choose for the monetary easy money, and they ignore the inflation to their peril. The only way that inflation is going to go down this year is if we have a recession. And then you have potentially a bigger problem. I asked my wife the other day, I said, if you had high inflation or a recession, which of these two evils? And she said, oh, probably I don't want recession because everybody suffers. But that's why inflation is the long-term silent killer. Recession is a little more short-term and obvious. So some of these consequences, we're at 21 after the hour. We have about 10 more minutes. We'll see if we can get through these. So the consequences of strife this is a high correlation. Global strife equals low economic growth, higher interest rates. So if we have a trend that global strife is increasing over a long-term steady trend, we can expect that the long-term projection for economic growth is also weak, and for higher interest rates is also here, and inflation, they're here with us to stay. We want peace when it comes to your money, let alone just living a good, safe life. Peace is what we want. Consequences of isolationism. We're going to talk a little longer about this, and I came up with 15. Now, and as I write here, keep in mind, I did my master's degree at a school called the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. So this is kind of my background, and it's of interest to me. So not surprisingly, when you go to a school of diplomacy and international law, you favor rule of law, you favor cooperation, working, that sort of thing. So I don't like isolationism. So understand that's my strong bias heading into this conversation. So let's look at 15. You have 6 in the economic category: reduced GDP, reduced imports, lost manufacturing jobs, higher consumer prices, supply chain disruptions, lost trading opportunities. It's difficult to see how isolationism helps not only the United States' economy, but any economy for that matter. So I'm quite critical on isolationism in terms of economic outcomes. It just doesn't work. Looking here to the lower left, lost manufacturing jobs. Hey, we're going to bring jobs back to America. That isn't happening. Ironically, manufacturing jobs are down every month in the last 10 months. So it just doesn't work. The next 3 under weakened alliances, diminished influence, you have loss of credibility, power vacuum, and reduced soft power. Is the United States historically has been criticized in many things by many, but also I think has been respected by many, because the United States has used its influence to promote peace, humanitarianism, and things like this, to be a beacon for the rest of the world. But that's really not the case anymore. Even pointing to a few days ago when the Olympic skier, was, hey, he said it's difficult to be representing the United States in Europe today because the United States is not what it used to be. So a lot of people have ambivalent feelings about representing the United States on travel. And it's a real unfortunate thing. I wish it were not so. The next 3: decreased national security, weakened alliances, arguably leave the U.S. less secure, more vulnerable than stronger. And when we have ambiguity regarding our commitment to something like NATO, that puts us in a more dangerous position, strategic position, arguably, than if we are secure in our alliances. And then I think it's lastly is missed opportunities. We, as who step away from global leadership, we miss out on opportunities. And with innovation, isolationism doesn't promote innovation, because when we're protecting our companies, our own interests, we create somewhat of a shield, and so we don't let companies, fight out to be the most competitive, most innovative. The best results are when we are creating a competitive environment. A healthy competitive environment creates better outcomes. So 15 reasons why I don't like isolationism. Okay. Oh, negative social impact. Oh, there were two more. Okay. Division, this us versus them. It's not a go. It's got to go. It's not healthy for the country. It's as Abraham Lincoln says here, and we have a picture of him. A house divided against itself cannot stand. The United States is a house divided against itself today, and it is losing in virtually every single category. We must come to a common ground. We must elect leaders and make decisions as communities and as states and as nations that are collective and working together rather than divisive. And then we have a nod here to mental health and social disconnection as well. Consequences of high indebtedness is the third consequence here. Indebtedness, restricted financial flexibility, increased stress, whether it's personal, corporate, or a government. There's an opportunity cost because now you have to spend more money paying down debt. And particularly what becomes a vicious cycle is that as interest rates go up on the US government debt, the cost to service that debt goes up as well. So now as a percentage of the US government budget, and we see this if you've had, the unfortunate opportunity to have a lot of indebtedness, personal indebtedness, same thing happens, right? So you get in debt, now your minimum credit card payment, let alone to pay it off, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you're spending, a third of your income paying your debt. You're never going to be moving forward in a positive direction. And this impacts your economic opportunity and growth and increases your vulnerability to some sort of systemic financial risk. Specific consequences, those were general. Specific ones, inflation. We talked about it. We'll talk about it again. Inflation is the biggest one. The dollar status is the world's fiat currency. So when we have a fiat currency, that means the currency that is recognized by virtually everyone in the world as the default currency. It's important to note that there has never been a fiat currency that has not eventually collapsed. Again, whether it's Rome, the British Empire, or the United States. Time is not on our side. We need to really be honest and aggressive so that we don't follow that same path of other empires and other great nations that have come before us, because as we've seen here, we do have the dollar still king, to be sure, but the trend is not in the right direction. And now you're having other things. And this is the reason why gold, we talked about this last month. Why is gold going up? Because people are saying, maybe the dollar isn't the trustworthy, credible currency that I want to have in my reserves. This is what people are saying, particularly central banks are saying, maybe we have something else. Fortunately for the United States, there's not really a good candidate, alternate, right? Are we going to be buying the Chinese renminbi as our currency? I think not, right? Are we going to buy the India currency? Swiss francs? Maybe, I don't know. But so the United States has enjoyed hegemony as the default currency, but we can't rest on our laurels. We need to shore up strength, and we do that by trying to minimize our indebtedness. Physical assets do relatively well. We said last year gold went up, stocks went up, but international stocks do better than domestic stocks. Higher interest rates and negative economic, you just don't have as much flexibility when you're spending money on debt. Okay, one more quiz here. It's 10:30, so I apologize. We're just about 5-10 minutes away. We'll wrap it up soon, but we are going to be going over time. Sovereign debt. Sovereign debt is a government defaulting. Concentrated, there have been a lot of them over the years. There's always a few here and there, but they're almost like little countries, African countries you probably never even heard of. But in the last 60 years, there have been two. Greece, just over 10 years ago in 2012. What was the other one? Excuse me, I get it.
Okay, and about half of the audience has voted. We'll give it a couple of more seconds here.
It's just a little interesting trivia.
Okay, we have over 85% of people voted. So at the moment, number one, most people, about 35% of the audience voted Germany as number one. Japan, 28% voted for Japan. And then after that was United States and France, tied about 15% of the audience for each of those.
The United States is the answer. Back in 1971, this is what led us to moving away, because we couldn't really finance our debt. And so we said, gold, which you can't fake, we're going to move off the gold standard. Bigger conversation, the answer, the United States. Oh, fun fact. Okay, asset classes in the last 100 years, 98 years, 97, I guess, because it's through 2025. Okay, so this is how money has done. Stocks, gold, bonds, housing, we'll call that real estate, cash, and inflation. Now, I want you to think for just a moment, because I'm going to go to the next slide, and there are going to be some pluses and some minuses. And I want you to be thinking about, since 2020, so this decade, we're halfway through the decade, since 2020, given the context that we're in right now, there are certain asset classes that do better than their long-term historical averages, and there are some that do worse. So everybody should think gold, because gold does better in this environment. And in fact, gold will have a plus next to it. So let's see which ones have pluses. Stocks, remember, stocks do well in an inflationary environment. Well, not they don't. Everything struggles with inflation, but at least stocks they tend to hold their value, right? Gold, real estate, and inflation is higher than its long-term historic average. So if you have a feeling like, oh, inflation is hurting, yes, we are tracking above long-term historical averages. Real estate, wow, cost of houses gone up. Yeah, that's right. Physical assets. Gold, wow, skyrocketing. Yeah, physical assets. And stocks, you own things, even though they may not be physical. What is underperforming so far this decade? Cash. Again, cash weakens with inflation, and the bond market is below long-term averages as well. Okay, the outlook for global strife. Unfortunately, the trend is toward escalation rather than de-escalation. Isolationism up in the air. Government indebtedness, more indebtedness, not less. But going back to isolationism, I think it's up in the air because I think the United States is at a real, crossroads in terms of its identity. What country are we going to be? And Trump, for better or for worse, has drawn a clear line in the sand about his vision for what America has been, what it is today, and what it will be in the future. He has a vision for America. I disagree with that almost categorically, but not ever, there are a lot of people who support Trump and that agenda. They like that. They're comfortable with that. There are a lot of people who are in opposition to Trump's vision for what America is. And so we have this great conflict. And when it comes to isolationism, we'll see what happens. I think if the Republicans lose, and Trump may have gone too far and there's a repudiation of Trumpism, or in fact, Trump's power consolidates further. Only time will tell. Consideration for action is the last thing I think this is the very last slide. We'll put on some disclosures there, and we'll post this to our website. But our last one, considerations for action. When it comes to strife, make a commitment to yourself. Be a person of peace in your families, in your neighborhoods, in your community, and in the country. Peace is good for economic productivity and security. Number two, advocate for global engagement and cooperation. When it comes to money, as we talked about before, isolation is a losing proposition. So try to get engagement. We want to eschew personal debt as much as possible, live within our means to avoid personal debt. When it comes to investing on finance, and I divide investing into financial and non-financial. On the financial investments, we want to do things that appreciate, that have pricing power over time, owning things, physical assets, owning companies that can price on their, the inflationary pressures to their consumers. Certain types of companies have more pricing power than others. And I think those kinds of companies are better positioned in this kind of an environment. Stocks, real estate, gold. I made a note here about digital currencies. And then lastly, ending on a positive note, I want to encourage everyone to remember that investing is, when we think of investing, we immediately think of money, but we also need to be thinking more globally about what investing is and what we're investing in. We want to be investing in things that have value, that have long-term value, that lift us and that lift our loved ones and our communities. So we want to be focused on, strengthening our families. We want to have, peace and harmony in our homes. We want to think about environmental conservation, honesty, integrity, learning, inquisitiveness. We want to be critical thinking. So when the press, because it's so difficult to know what to believe these days, and there's such a crisis of truthfulness in our society, well, how do we get around that? We're critical. We ask questions. We challenge our news sources. We demand answers from our politicians. We don't just go along with the flow, but we think and we take action to lift ourselves, our loved ones, and lift others. Thank you very much for your time. DJ, were there any messages, questions? Gosh, I just talked so much.
No, we did not have any coming through, but just good content.
They dare not, maybe because of the speed. Well, look, if you have any questions, of course, we'd love to talk to you. We're available. Reach out to us. Thank you again for your time, and we'll talk to you next month. Bye now.
You want to, and Ben, if you want to show, just so we have the disclosures up there.
Oh, disclosures. Yes. Doing my duty. Yeah. And I don't know here, I wanted to say, this is definitely more of an opinionated piece compared to other ones. I try to be as objective as possible, but this one definitely had, a little more, commentary than others. So if my disclosure doesn't say it, please recognize I understand that I have biases, and that should be taken into consideration. But we want to be as factual as possible. We want to cite references and sources as possible. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. Take care.